What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with DFS coming at you with the last video of the season. This is the Super Bowl Showdown on DraftKings. I will have a FanDuel video going out tomorrow, but this is just the DraftKings one. So let's just get right into it. So statistically looking, these two teams are very comparable in a lot of stats. If you go and look at I'd say about 80% of stats, these teams match up very well. They're very neck and neck in almost every category. Obviously, the Chiefs secondary is a lot worse than the Eagles secondary, but there are times to where Chiefs secondaries look good. There's times where they look bad. In Philly's defense, we've really not seen them tested so far in this playoff run. So let's break it down. So if you're new here, what I try to do first is show you guys the values, because although it's easy to talk about all these guys up here, but it's hard to talk about how to fill out your lineup with trying to afford some of those guys. So value, I find everything 3K and under. That's where you save pennies. That's where if you have a winning lineup, there's a good chance you have somebody that's somewhere in the ballpark of 5K and under, but usually you'll find someone under 3K. So let's break it down of who we have. So on Philly side, we have Boston Scott here at 3K. Obviously, you look at his just numbers. 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games. Get some carries, but it's found the end zone in the last 3 games. The streak against the Giants is one thing, but finds the end zone last week against San Fran. Even though that game was not really even a game. But at 3K, a guy that's gotten a touchdown, the guy that's gotten over 8 fantasy points a game is definitely worth a watch there. Now, Justin Watson, I wouldn't say he's really a watch. Obviously, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Juju, MVS, all those guys are up there as well. But at 2K, you look at Justin Watson, he's gotten targets. It's not like he hasn't gotten anything. At 2K, though, for the targets he has got, it is risky, especially against the secondary. He is someone that you could throw in, but he's not one of those guys that I'm looking for. Noah Gray is somebody that I am. So, same thing, you look at his numbers, and yeah, nothing really stands out. But at 1,200, in with Travis Kelce being out there, look for someone like Noah Gray to get on the field, who does get on the field quite a bit, to get on the field and get an opportunity. It's kind of the same thing with Blake Bell. Both these guys are guys that can get on the field, steal a 2-yard touchdown that the Chiefs do some funky stuff with. If you've watched any of their games, they like to be unpredictable when it comes to the red zone. So Noah Gray at 1,200, Blake Bell at 400. Both backup tight ends for Kansas City, and I would expect Noah Gray, I think it's more volume as far as snap count than Blake Bell. I could be mistaken, but I believe that's the case. With how good Philly's defense is, especially the rush, I would look at Kansas City trying to bring in a 2 tight end formation a little more to kind of slow up that Philly rush. So Noah Gray, 1,200 is a value. And then we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which is definitely a weird one. So coming back, you would think that he would get some type of volume, but their running back room of Pacheco and both McKinnon, they both played very well to where you don't need to get Edwards-Helaire in there, especially just coming back from his injury. Hasn't played since week 11, so I would be hesitant to play Edwards-Helaire. I do think that he can be a value in a sense. Maybe get some of that goal line work, but I don't know. I don't know what to really do with Edwards-Helaire right now. Obviously, being under 3K, he's a value, but a good value, I don't know. I miss Quez Watkins, and I apologize. The reason I miss him is I have no ambition to play Quez Watkins here. Very bad matchup. He is the only bad matchup for the Philly receivers this week. And you can look at his numbers. He's gotten some deep targets and some opportunities, but just nothing really stood out this year as being a guy you really want to play, especially with how good Philly's pass offense can be when they need to be. He just hasn't been involved. Same thing for Zach Pascal, just hasn't really been involved. And that's pretty much it for your value. So you're looking at the Kansas City side of Edwards-Helaire, Blake Bell, Noah Gray, Watson, and on the Philly side, we're pretty much just looking at Boston Scott. That's the only one that we're really looking for at 3K. So now that we got the values out of the way, let's talk about our pay-ups. So we have 3 players above 10K, 2 above 11, and it's both quarterbacks of Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. This is probably a matchup where you want both quarterbacks, but then you have to find out where you're not going to have a player at. So, like I mentioned, we really haven't seen this Philadelphia team challenged yet. The Giants, I think, they were a good underdog story this year, but really didn't have the roster to compete in the playoffs. So it made it very clear that Philly was going to stomp past them. And then last week, unfortunately, Philly's offense played a very good defense. Don't get me wrong, and they were able to get some points, but still, even in that game, we really didn't get to see Philly's offense tested just because of the quarterback situation. It sucked. Is what it is. It happened. It's in the past. But yeah, we haven't really seen them tested. The Chiefs defense, like I mentioned, their secondary isn't good. They had times to where they looked good in this season, and then they had times where they went and looked like the same old Chiefs secondary. So the interesting thing is you're facing 2 of the most sacked defenses. So teams that are going to sack the quarterback. Jalen Hurts, I apologize, definitely is the quarterback that I'm looking at more, just because he is able to be more mobile than Patrick Mahomes this week. He has been mobile this season. We really haven't seen any of those games like we did last year. Obviously, the game against Green Bay, you get the Colts against the Giants. Like, yeah, those are some games where he gets rushing, but against a team that gets a lot of sacks like Kansas City does as well, I'd look for Jalen Hurts to be able to move out of the pocket, them using the RPO and stuff like that. So Jalen Hurts, 200 more than Patrick Mahomes, yes, I'm okay with paying for. Patrick Mahomes, if you've looked at him so far, obviously being banged up is a question mark, and we're interested to see his ability, but he's been pretty good so far in the playoffs. You look at the scores, they've scored 23, they scored 27, both games they let up 20, but as far as the yardage, obviously against Jacksonville, gets banged up, gets out, but he still manages to throw 30 times. Last week against Cincinnati, while banged up, 43 times, but you didn't see the rushing, which is why we like someone like Jalen Hurts a little bit more, especially with how good Philly's secondary has been. But like I said, we haven't seen them tested, and we know how good Kansas City can be. Even in their last Super Bowl appearance when they got blown out, I mean, a lot of it was just players not playing well. They didn't have their tackles. Guys weren't catching catchable balls. Mahomes was getting pressured every play because of his tackles. We're not going to get that same situation here. So I like both quarterbacks in this matchup. If you asked me to pick one, I would pay $200 more for Jalen Hurts, though. And then we get Travis Kelce as the other player above 10K. A little rougher matchup. Chiefs, or the Eagles, I should say, have only allowed 3 touchdowns to tight ends this year. And with Travis Kelce, I don't think he applies to any of those rules, especially in the playoffs. You've looked 55 points in 2 games so far in the playoffs, 25 targets in that, and 3 touchdowns. So I don't think Travis Kelce really applies to that rule. Philly knows that Kansas City is going to use Travis Kelce, so look for them to try to game script around him, but Travis Kelce will definitely get his targets. I don't know if he's really worth paying that 10-6 right now, especially if you're trying to get both quarterbacks. I don't think it's really possible to get Travis Kelce without getting somebody like an A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Miles Sanders. You're probably not getting any of those guys if you're paying up for the top 3. And this is without captaining them. I'm just going to show you guys a quick example here. So if you put those 3 in, we only have 5,700 to get your rest of the lineup. And if you captain anybody, you're paying a pretty penny. So let's just say you wanted to captain Miles Sanders, for instance. You're left with $2,700 to fill out your roster, and you still don't have a pass catcher for Philly. So that's just an example. So now, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I'm leaning A.J. Brown. I like A.J. Brown in this matchup. Devontae Smith also has a really good matchup here. But for $600 more, I'm going to pay for the guy that is going to be relied upon in this game. You've seen his targets. His yardage obviously hasn't been there so far in the playoffs. It hasn't needed to be. But you look before the playoffs and almost hitting 100 yards the last two games, hitting 103 against Dallas. The factor in that as well, the game against New Orleans, the game against Dallas, is there wasn't Jalen Hurts, that was Gardner Minshew. But I'm going to rely on the script that says big time players make big time plays in big time games. So I'm looking at A.J. Brown. I'm looking at the guy that they traded for, the guy that they're paying big now. I'm looking at him to be that guy. Devontae Smith, I think, still is a good play, but same thing as Hurts or Mahomes. If you ask me to pick one, I'm picking A.J. Brown in this matchup. Miles Sanders, I can't justify paying Miles Sanders' price tag. Yes, I get he got 17.5 points. He gets the 2 touchdowns. You take those 2 touchdowns away, and he gets you 5.5 points. You take one away, he gets 11.5. For that price tag, I don't think it's really worth it. I'd rather go with pass catchers in this game. I do think teams are going to be able to run the ball. I don't want to take a risk on Isaiah Pacheco or Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, Pacheco getting over 10 fantasy points a game. Some of those games being dependent on touchdowns, but still getting over those 10. And you look at Jerick McKinnon, kind of has dropped off a little bit. I think teams finally got that the Chiefs are going to use McKinnon in the pass game. So same thing. If you ask me to pick one, I'm going to pick Isaiah Pacheco. He's going to get the carries. I don't like either one entirely, though, because I think McKinnon can be used. I think Pacheco can be used. They're going to go with a hot hand there. I do like Dallas Goedert, though, at 6,400 against the Chiefs. Chiefs, I think a top 5 team in touchdowns allowed to tight ends. We know how reliant Jalen Hurts has been on Dallas Goedert in clutch situations this game. A guy whose yardage prop probably going to be taking in this game. But Dallas Goedert, definitely a yes for me in this game. And then we get to the Chiefs wide receivers finally. MVS being the most expensive, which is kind of shocking. I get he has a really good game. 6 for 8, 116 and a touchdown. Kind of what they were hoping to get out of him in free agency. And then we get Juju here, who Juju's numbers have not looked good recently. But, you know, earlier in the season, they looked good. It's very hard for me to pick a Kansas City wide receiver. Obviously, I'd probably go the hot hand on MVS, but I don't love it because the week before in the divisional game, gets 2 targets for 6 yards and a touchdown. That's it. I mean, this year, he's had some games, but he's also had some duds. If I had to rely on somebody, I'd pick Juju just because of the price difference. $600 for that. But I'm also looking at Kadarius Toney's health. Obviously, he is the only one limited in practice for the Chiefs, and at 4,400, he's definitely a game changer. You look at games to where he's played and been healthy, and he's put up 10 fantasy points. So he's definitely someone I'm looking at. Past Kenneth Gainwell, and I apologize, but at 5,000, Kenneth Gainwell. If you want me to pick a Philadelphia Eagles running back, I'm going to go Kenneth Gainwell. Obviously being used in all aspects of the field, not just the passing, not just the rushing, not just the red zone. Kind of gets a mix of all that, and you get him in the middle of paying down for Miles Sanders, who I think is too much, and paying up from Boston Scott, who's got a little volume. So Kenneth Gainwell at 5,000 is definitely the running back for the Eagles that I would pick. Now we get the kickers. So we get 2 of the most efficient offenses in the red zone with Kansas City and Philadelphia. Now, if you're asking me of what offense might struggle to score, I'm going to say Kansas City's offense. I don't want to say Kansas City's offense because obviously they're the top two. It is Philly and Kansas City of the most efficient red zone teams. But I'm going to rely on Harrison Butker to get some points in this game. You've seen what he's done the last 2 weeks with them pretty much putting up a similar score, 27-23, 2 field goals in one game, 3 in the other, but gets the yardage bonus to help him out. And for Philly, I keep saying it, we've yet to see them tested, so it's really hard to judge Jake Elliott because they faced a team with no quarterback and a team that really shouldn't. I'm going to offend Giants fans, and I apologize, but they shouldn't have been in the playoffs. That roster was not meant to be in the playoffs. They played way above expectations, and it's good for them, and I don't want to harp on that, but still. So both kickers are playable. I'm going to lean towards Harrison Butker in this matchup, though, at 4K. But I think if you were to put Jake Elliott in, it wouldn't be bad either. It's a 50-50 on a lot of the players today. I think it's whatever you're feeling more comfortable with. I, myself, am on Harrison Butker. Sky Moore, I mentioned. If Kadarius Toney's out, look for Sky Moore. Look for Justin Watson to get some uptick in snaps. Obviously, Mecole Hardman is done for the season, unfortunately. And if Kadarius Toney is, if you hear that he's limited all the week until the Super Bowl, obviously this video is going out on Thursday, so we only have about 2 more days of practice / information on that. So if he's still limited or questionable going into that game, he's obviously gonna, if he's healthy enough, he's gonna play. But I look at Sky Moore at 3,800, and then we mentioned Justin Watson here at 2K. Look at those guys to get some snaps in this game. And then last is the defenses. So if I were to pick a defense, I'm going to pick the defense that has played well. That's the Eagles. Chiefs has still been able to put up points, but playing a Jacksonville secondary, which I don't think was good, and a Cincinnati secondary, which I do think was good. I think that secondary was a good test for Kansas City, but they're facing one of the best secondaries in football. I would be able to make that debate of the best secondary in football. So I would rely on the team that's got sacks, that is going for the sack record in a season for the Eagles. I'm willing to do that. I just haven't, I continue to mention I haven't seen enough from the Chiefs defense to make me fall in love with them, although they do get sacks as well, and we could see that in an RPO offense to where Jalen Hurts tries to throw, can't, get sacked. Those opportunities will come for the Chiefs defense as well. So now I'm just going to try to make a lineup based off of what we went off of, and let's see what we can do here. So I mentioned I like Harrison Butker. I'm going to put a value guy in there to start it off. And I mentioned I like Kenneth Gainwell, another guy. So we got 11. Let's see what we could do. Let's see what we could put together. So I'm going to flex Dallas Goedert as well. And I know I want A.J. Brown. So let's see what we could do. So if I get Jalen Hurts, I get 86, and I don't get Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes. So don't want to do that right off the bat. So let's see if we captain, that won't work either. So I'm going to switch it. I'm going to captain A.J. Brown and see what that does to our total. So we get 10-4. We're only able to afford 1. So let's get off of Dallas Goedert. Let's get Hurts and Mahomes both in there. Obviously don't have a pass catcher for Kansas City. So let's get, if Kadarius Toney's in, let's get Kadarius Toney. Now, obviously, not the most ideal lineup. This is just off the top of my head. 600 left over. We're not captaining one of the quarterbacks just to get some of those guys in there that I talked about that I liked. Obviously, a lot of risk with Gainwell, Butker, and Kadarius Toney. But you're relying on the quarterbacks and A.J. Brown, and you're relying on Kadarius Toney to be playing and then to put up similar points to Travis Kelce, MVS, and Juju. So hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot to me. If you guys are interested in joining our Discord, obviously the NFL season is ending, so we do have NBA and NHL. So if you guys are interested in that, just click the link in the description, and I will see you guys tomorrow.